All right. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm just going to go forward with, oh, we are live. Fantastic. Okay, so um, I'm going to get this presentation started. Hopefully you can see my screen and I'm doing this correctly. If not, please let me know if I am not doing this correctly. Yep. Okay, looks like it. I am going to go forward. My name is Liam Martin, and this presentation is beautifully entitled, quasi-beautifully entitled, Suddenly Remote. So we've had a huge revolution inside of remote work with the pandemic, and I know a lot of people in the gaming industry are probably experiencing this same thing where maybe for the very first time you've been remote. And I'm going to be covering this from a business owner's perspective, a manager's perspective, and then an employee's perspective. And generally, the thesis of this entire presentation is don't panic, but take action. We are going to be seeing a monumental shift over the next few weeks and months towards a remote philosophy. So it's really important that you understand how to work remote, particularly inside of the gaming sphere, because it's just going to be, my estimate is we're probably going to see 60 to 70% of the entire gaming industry go completely remote. We're currently at those numbers now, and I expect that to probably remain stable even after the pandemic is over, and I have a lot of reasonings as to why. If you have any questions, by the way, put them down in the chat. I'd love to be able to answer them after the presentation is over. I'm looking at one screen, which unfortunately doesn't allow me to look at chat, but after that, please do ask as many questions as possible, as quickly as possible afterwards. So a little bit about me. I am the co-founder and CMO of a few different companies, Time Doctor and Staff.com, which are both time tracking tools for remote workers. And then I also run Running Remote, which is the largest conference on building and remote teams. We've had people like Sarah Sutton from FlexJobs, Amir from Todoist, Joel Gascoigne from Buffer, Dominic Price from Atlassian, Lara Owen from GitHub, a bunch of other people that are all experts on building and scaling remote teams. We actually have people in 37 different countries all over the world, and we have a philosophy that you should be able to hire people wherever you want, whenever you want. And that's what feeds into everything that we do inside of the company. Now, the current pandemic, unfortunately, winter is coming. It is a serious thing that everyone needs to be able to address now, because if you understand how to work remotely today, you will be absolutely perfectly set for the future job market in the next 3, 6, 9, 18 months, which is going to be a remote first working model. So if a lot of you didn't know this already from my accent, I'm Canadian. Just a little bit of a background on me. When in Canada, there are two things you usually do. You either play hockey or you figure skate. On the age of 13, I was more kind of interested in the figure skating side of the spectrum until I ended up breaking my leg and getting kicked out of the sport. That led here, which was McGill University. And it led me to about 9 years of undergraduate and graduate school, where I ended up entering into lecturing and thinking that I was going to go the academic route. I ended up teaching my very first class. I remember teaching that like yesterday, even though it was almost 15 years ago. That class started with 300, ended up with a little bit more than 150. And I got some of the worst professor reviews in the history of the department. And the department had been up and running for about 125 years. This is just one of them. Worst Prophet McGill. I think he enjoys watching everyone fail. Not super helpful or nice to students, just horrible. So that led me to walking into my supervisor's office. This is supervisor, Morton Weinfeld. And I said, I don't think I'm very good at this. And he said, no, you're not. So I said, well, where do I go next? And he said, well, you can keep doing this teaching thing, but you've really got to get good at teaching for the next 20 years before you actually get to do fun. So with that said, I threw a master's thesis under his door and I was out into the real world. led to remote work, which for me is a much more passionate realm that I'm very excited about. And up until about necessarily too sure about that direction in life, but now it is the way to build businesses. And I think based off this presentation, I'd love to get your input, but I think by the end of this presentation, you will agree with me. So we're going to break this down very tactically into 3 separate categories: what you should do for your business, what you should do as a manager, and then what you should do as an employee. So I have a little bit of everything for everybody. So please let me know if there's anything that you want me to touch on in a deep way at the end of this presentation, and I can totally go into that. Business. So you need to be able to assess your costs. You need to be able to audit operations. You need to be able to do process documentation, and then you need to pay attention to all of the people that are below you, all of their mental health. So first off, I want to give you some real facts. Assume 6 to 18 months of this pandemic occurring. I do not think that we're going to be able to get that type of regular until there is a vaccine for this virus, unfortunately. So that boils down to some very hard decisions that I think you're going to have to make very quickly. First off, office leases. So if you can get rid of your office lease today, I would highly suggest that you try to do that. So do not renew any office lease. A lot of the landlords are going to be able to try to pressure you into renewing that lease. Do not do it under any circumstances whatsoever. I'm going to show you with a little bit more data that the remote work model is actually incredibly profitable, and right with getting your office lease, you're going to lose about 30% of your hard costs, which is really important. Equipment costs. You're going to want to shed a lot of those costs as quickly as possible. Even if you have an option out, go in, get the equipment, put in free remote workers' home work setup as quickly as possible. That's going to save you a ton of costs. Software costs. Assess your P&L right now. Figure out what costs you have versus what costs you could theoretically cut. I know for us, we audit every quarter, and usually we pull about 5% of our software costs off the top. And then the last category would obviously be staff. You need to make these cuts as quickly as possible because, as I've said before, this is going to be a long-term pandemic. I think the gaming industry is one that's probably going to grow pretty exponentially during this time, but you still need to be mindful of figuring out where your costs, how can you cut them, and obviously do them in that order. Staff are the last priority in terms of your cutting. You can keep someone employed, absolutely do it at the expense of an office lease or equipment. 20% rule. So you need to audit your a standard operating procedure. Well, basically a bunch of different processes inside of your business. This is the absolute, this is the biggest reason why remote companies succeed or fail, is building process documentation. So I have what's called the 4 Ds inside of process documentation, which is discover, design, deploy, and debug. Inside of every company, you should be building operational processes, digitizing them, putting them up on some type of platform, making them easily shareable with everyone else, and then figuring out how to debug them over time. So the 4 Ds are discover the history of the process. So as an example, let's say a QA process for a development team. How do you do it? Why is it done that way? Basically, figure out that history. Then you want to go into the design stage. I have inside of that the rule of 3, which is the first time that I do something, I myself. The second time that I do something, I think about writing it down, and then the third time I write it down. And you would think that this would initially slow you down. What it does is significantly accelerates what you're doing. So inside of our company, the reason why I don't have this done the 300th time versus the third time is because I understand all of the small details inside of that process, and that's the piece that I think is absolutely important when you're building out process. You want to be able to make sure that someone is running the process as you are approaching it. Next is the deploy stage. So you have 4 stages to that: test, apply, use, and get feedback. So you deploy out to your people and you say, hey, do you like this process, but what are three things that I could do to be able to make that process better? And then the final stage is the debug stage, which basically just means you take that feedback, you go back to your design, and you redeploy until you have perfect process. Now, boring, I know. Become a big company, this is the way that you need to be able to do it. Thankfully, GitLab has actually made it very, very easy for you. If you go to about.gitlab.com/handbook, they have the largest remote process documentation guide on the internet today. It's 3,200 pages. They teach you absolutely everything that you could possibly think of about how to build and scale a remote team. So if you want to know their company values, it's there. If you want to know what kind of stock options they have, it's there. If you want to know how they do a product demo, it's all there. So the founders of GitLab encourage you to steal this repo. Just simply fork it for yourself, edit the stuff that you need, and then you have at least a baseline to build out your processes in a bigger way. Next one is for managers. So clear communication, clear metrics, and mental health. Those are the three things that you should be doing as a manager right now inside of your video, as an example. So inside of your own teams, you must force communication. This is something that a lot of people don't really understand. Inside of brick and mortar companies, you might just have that sort of, I might call it the water cooler or coffee break conversations that lead into bigger discussions. But inside of remote teams, because everyone is working from their own computers, this has to be a lot more forced. So there are interesting kind of fixes that we make to be able to make up for those water cooler conversations. Inside of this, you need to be able to make sure that you set up those forced meetings. We like to do weekly meetings with a team, and then I also do one-on-ones with every direct report that I have inside of the company. So this is just a doc with basically all of the metrics that we have inside of the company and where we are. So green means you're doing well, yellow means you're okay, you may or may not make, red means you're not making your target for the quarter. Every single person has a clear metric. We have quarterly goals. We check in weekly, and it's a very easy process, and it allows me to be able to make course corrections very quickly inside of the company. In terms of communication, there are basically 4 clear levels of communication that you want to touch on. In-person beats video, video beats audio, audio beats instant messaging, and instant messaging beats email. As you move up the chain, you become more synchronous. As you move down the chain, you become more asynchronous. You really need to be able to adapt your communication style based off of, number one, the culture of your company. Does someone need to actually just get to like locked into a cocoon and code for 8 or 9 hours? Or is it more an organization that really needs to communicate as much as possible? So that would be video as an example inside of a remote team. Get on camera, pick up all of those nonverbal cues, otherwise video or instant messaging. Also, you really need to be able to tell people who you are as a person. So I have this, which is Blueprint to Liam and his weird little quirks. I actually threw this document around to 3 of my closest friends, and I asked them, what would you tell somebody who's about to work for me how to get the most out of me as a manager? And they came up with these 8 things. So the full document, I can send it to anybody who's interested. At the end of it, I have this thesis statement, which is, I value decision-making above all else. I'd rather make the wrong decision than nothing at all. And that's also really critical inside of remote teams. If you have someone who's working on the other side of the planet, as an example, we have our server admin who is in Tokyo. I really can't make a decision that allow him to really make his workday effective. He has to make all of his own decisions. He basically has to be his own manager, and then I can check in and see whether or not I agree with those decisions the next day. So you need a lot of really independent thinkers inside of remote teams. Remote teams fundamentally are people, process, and tools in that order. Before I show everyone this slide, they always kind of write down notes. Again, I'll give you these slides if you really want them, but fundamentally, It's not just about the tools, which I'm about to show you. It's about the people and then the process, i.e. the first 2 points that I had for you before we jumped into this one. But let's go into a couple tools for remote teams. Use the Bose SoundTrue Ultras. They are the microphone and earbuds that I have right now. They're about $70. Buy them and send them to everyone inside of your company. Reason why is they're quite comfortable, but they have a really good microphone and they're cost effective. We use them everywhere, and I have almost a dozen of these floating around, not only computer bag, everywhere. Get a password tool. We use 1Password. You can use anything that you want. What we do inside of the company is we provide encrypted passwords for everyone, so that if you have to let someone go in the future, you don't have to actually change the passwords, because they just get the cipher. They don't actually get the individual password itself. Super useful. I think 1Password is like $1 to $2 per user per month. Get everyone to run a speed test. Send them to speedtest.net and have them send you back the URL. If they have lower than 5 down and 5 up with a ping of below 25 milliseconds, go and upgrade their internet. I like the ViewSonic VX32. It is a computer monitor, which I actually do have behind me, that allows you to be able to power your computer through USB Type-C. It's about $350. It's not the nicest computer monitor in the world, but it's definitely a great monitor. It gets the job in terms of extra productivity. G Suite, Google Apps for Business. If you're using Microsoft Teams, that's a totally cool tool, but G Suite is a fantastic tool. It allows you to be able to have cloud documents, spreadsheets, files, calendars, absolutely everything. I think it costs like $20 per user per year for the full G Suite package, and it's pretty awesome. Slack is really the definitive leader in instant messaging inside of remote teams. Honorable mention to twist.com as well, which you might want to check out. Jing is a really good tool. It allows you to be able to have a 5-minute screen grab video of me describing audio over a video screen grab, and then I can send that as a bit.ly link to somebody inside of an instant messaging, as an example. Stormboard is a really good tool for online collaboration. It's basically a board. Skype is a really good free option for video conferencing. Zoom is a really good option for paid video conferencing. Just depends on what your budget is. Basecamp is a really good tool for project management for remote teams. Trello is a really good tool for small project management teams. I believe they have a free up to 10 users plan, which is pretty cool. And of course, Time Doctor, I wouldn't want to not mention that. However, I'm quite biased because I am one of the co-founders of that company. From the employee perspective, biggest thing that you can do to be able to make sure that you're successful inside of a remote team is, number one, you need to be able to stay safe. Number two is you need to be able to adapt to new situations. And number three, you need to be able to adapt to the mental health challenges currently happening. So communicating your value is absolutely critical inside of remote teams, because you're not there, you're not in front of those people in this. Really, it's your KPIs that a remote employer or manager are going to see more than necessarily whether you're coming up with really innovative ideas, which is unfortunate, but just the reality of the situation inside of remote teams. So it's so critical to make sure that you're doing that properly and that you're communicating your value, whether that's just, hey, I'm committing better code than anyone else, whatever that might be. Like, find out clear KPIs and then try to show those off to your employer. And also really start adapting towards a remote first mindset. So are you distracting people more than you should, as an example? There's a big debate between asynchronous and synchronous communication inside of remote teams. Depending upon your organization, you might be more of an async group, meaning, hey, don't instant message me, don't call me, just make sure I'm sending emails, doing Jira tickets, stuff like that. Or you might be more of a synchronous organization, meaning, yeah, jump on a video call as quickly as humanly possible, because I want to be able to communicate with you in terms of speed at the expense of quite possibly bugging people and pulling them out of their flow state focus. So to figure out where you're at and then adapt, and communicate your value. Mental health. Again, I've actually mentioned this for the business owner and the manager and the employee. You need to be able to measure that daily. I have, not directly in front of me, unfortunately, but I have a journal that I keep where I kind of define how good I feel each day out of 5, both mentally and physically. I would suggest that you start doing that, start recording that, because we're definitely in unprecedented times. Mental health is something that doesn't just happen or not happen. It usually happens quite slowly and it sneaks up on you. So you need to be able to measure that daily and then report back how you feel. If you're feeling mentally unstable, if you're starting to feel like you're getting more pressure and stress inside of your life, reach out to somebody as quickly as possible, and focus on improvement. So what do I mean by that? It means if you're measuring your data every single day and you have that clear KPI, it's important to be able to make sure that you're trying to move that number in the opposite direction, because it can happen slowly. But once you get into chemical depression, it's really something that takes months to get out of. I know that that's something that's happened to me before, and I think we should be discussing it a lot more. And I think that right now we're probably going to have a lot of really unhappy, mentally unstable people over the next few months. So something to measure for sure, because it's going to be absolutely critical towards your overall productivity. So remote work is absolutely the future. Just a couple stats off the top. Remote workers have a 25% higher retention rate than their on-premise. 65% of people want to work remotely. And by the way, we're at about 65% remote work inside of the United States right now, which is an unprecedented number. We were at 4% in 2018. So we've seen an absolute jump inside of remote work. The majority of workers now are working remotely. We're about 35% faster to hire than the on-premise counterparts, and remote work is way up. This was actually a stat from last year. We're in probably completely unprecedented times, but remote work is absolutely the dominant way of working, and it will be in the future, even after the pandemic. As I've laid out here, the reality is that remote work is a more cost-efficient way to work, and it is a way to work that is more advantageous to the employee. My general thesis is that remote work gives employees and employers the opportunity to find the best of each other. So if you're sitting there right now watching this presentation thinking, man, this is something that I'd love to be able to, please up. I'd love to talk to you about it, because it is completely and utterly the best business model. And not only that, the jobs that you're going to start to see pop up inside of remote work are going to be probably a better paying job and more freedom-based job than anything that you've seen in a brick and mortar position. So I'm going to answer a couple questions in the chat if they're available. If you want to learn more about what we're doing, just check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/runningremote. That is where we've got over 200 videos of different talks that happened at the Running Remote conference. We've put it all up for free. And if you want to just learn more about Running Remote in general, we're running virtual events all the time. Just go to www.runningremote.com. All right, so it looks like we've got a couple of questions. Jason, we've got to go to Canada from Jason. Thank you very much, Canada. Jason, I am Canadian. I'm from Montreal, Canada. Okay, so Jason asked this question: is there any reason you'd suggest Slack over Discord? You know what? It's interesting. There's a bias inside of the gaming industry for Discord. And I totally understand where that's coming from, because it's been pre-built inside of that community. What I would suggest that you do is Discord is probably a really great tool to be able to work. And I think since you're inside of gaming space, you should probably stick with it. I would look at Discord, I would look at Slack, and I would look at Twist. So Slack and Twist, and I'll get these other questions. Just keep asking them and I can jump on for whatever question that you might have. So Slack and Twist are a really interesting dynamic between asynchronous communication, meaning inside of remote teams, there's an argument that the constant pings and pops and Facebook notifications and Twitter DMs and all that kind of stuff pulls you out of your flow state, particularly if you're a developer. We've seen very definitively with Time Doctor, the data that people that can stay focused are usually the people that are not getting all of those little notifications. And so Twist is built completely on an asynchronous premise, meaning let's try to notify you as least as humanly possible and only bring in the most important information that you particularly need to know, versus Slack is just an open pipe. It's trying to notify you as much as humanly possible. So take that in consideration. I might all three and just kind of come up with a good decision at the end of this. All right, next question, Jason. Haven't used Slack, curious if there's an advantage. So the biggest advantage with Slack and Twist is just the integrations. So as an example, let's directly, and I don't know whether Discord does this, but you could integrate Jira directly into Slack. So you could see if a ticket gets updated that you're connected to, it could push notify you that particular update right inside of a Slack channel. So that's the real magic of a tool like Slack or Twist. It just has so many integrations. I'm assuming Discord does not, because that gets more focused on gaming than anything else. Ollie, want to remind that we are Facebook side with separate chat. Okay, there's a Facebook chat as well. So if you guys have any other questions, I might just jump over to Facebook after this and answer them there, and I'll answer them through text. But again, if you have any questions, I'm available all the time. Just go to the best place to go and check me out is youtube.com/runningremote. If you put up a comment or if you interact and ask a question, I'll get back to you personally within sometimes minutes, realistically. And yeah, it's this will get better. I think that this is something that we're all moving through a really difficult time, and remote work has been one of those things that I think is a fantastic silver lining for where we're currently going right now. So anyone that is currently in this space that has recently lost their job, you're looking in the wrong place if you're not looking remote, because we are trying to hire everyone in the remote workspace is trying to hire so many people right now. It's just mind-blowing. The space there, I think, is probably 20x'd in the last couple months since the pandemic. So if you have any questions, go check us out on YouTube. And Jason, thank you very much. Go check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/runningremote. And other than that, I will see all of you guys, hopefully, back at YouTube. Or I might be poking around a couple of these talks here. So hope that you guys have a fantastic conference. See you later.